What happens when one of music's most genuine voices sits down for what should be a simple morning interview only to be ambushed by a host with an agenda? In less than a minute, George Stephanopoulos went from seasoned anchor to national embarrassment, all because he couldn't handle the authenticity of his guest. This is the story of how Teddy Swims supposedly got kicked off Good Morning America, and how the internet quickly decided who the real villain was. The studio lights were bright as Teddy Swims walked onto the GMA set. He was there to promote his latest album, talk about his tour, and share his journey from viral covers to sold-out arenas. The audience was excited. Teddy had become the people's artist, some real, in an industry that often felt manufactured. He wore his usual casual style, tattoos visible, a warm Georgia smile on his face. Across from him sat George Stephanopoulos, with Robin Roberts and Michael Strahan at the anchor desk. The segment began normally enough. George opened with a practiced smile. Teddy greeted him with his trademark warmth, but the tone shifted quickly. When George asked, "When did you decide to actually become a real artist?" the question landed like a slap. Robin's eyes widened. Michael shifted in his seat. Teddy recovered gracefully, explaining that he had always been a real artist, and that his covers were pieces of his heart, not training wheels. George waved the answer off dismissively and continued. Robin tried to redirect, praising Teddy's original music, but George pushed back, insisting that covers weren't legitimate. Then came the next jab. George questioned Teddy's appearance at tattoos, the casual vibe implying that mainstream America wouldn't take him seriously. The studio went uncomfortably quiet as Teddy defended his authenticity. His tattoos told his story, he said. He wasn't a costume. He wasn't pretending. But George pressed harder. He criticized image, professionalism, presentation. Robin interrupted. Again, Michael finally spoke up too, gently reminding George that fans loved Teddy exactly as he was. Still, George kept going. He brought up Teddy's background, fast food, retail jobs, and questioned whether he felt out of place among artists with prestigious educations and industry connections. Teddy's warmth began to fade. He explained that he earned everything he had through hard work and didn't need privilege or pedigree to validate his talent. George chuckled and accused him of being defensive. That was the moment the mood snapped. Teddy called his behavior disrespectful. The audience murmured in support. George leaned forward, taking on a sharper tone, insisting he was merely asking tough questions. Teddy fired back, saying George had insulted him from the moment he sat down, questioning his legitimacy, his appearance, and his background. "That's not journalism," he said. "That's just being a bully with a fancy desk." The audience erupted. Robin nodded. Michael smirked. George doubled down, reminding everyone how long he'd been in the business and insisting that Teddy was only there because they were giving him a platform. And that, Teddy said, was the real problem. Teddy sat back in his chair, eyes steady. "That's what this is really about," he said. "You think you're better than me? You think because you've been on television forever, that gives you the right to look down on people. Let me tell you something, George. Those covers you dismissed, those connected with millions of people, and those regular jobs you tried to make me feel bad about, they kept me grounded and taught me more about real life than you've probably experienced in your bubble." George's face flushed red. "How dare you? Do you know who you're talking to?" "I'm talking to someone who forgot what it means to be humble," Teddy replied, his voice steady but powerful. "You sit up there in your designer suit, looking down at everyone, thinking you're untouchable. But you're not. You're just a guy with a microphone who's gotten too comfortable being mean." Robin tried stepping in. "Let's all take a breath. Asterisk, no, Robin, George snapped. Eyes locked on Teddy. This person comes onto our prestigious show and thinks he can lecture me about humility. Someone who got famous singing karaoke on the internet thinks he can tell me how to conduct an interview. Asterisk karaoke, Teddy repeated slowly. Something shifted in him. You know what, George? I came here with nothing but respect. I was excited to be on this show. I grew up watching Good Morning America. But you've made it crystal clear that unless someone fits into your narrow little box of what's acceptable, they don't deserve respect. Asterisk, Michael Strahan stepped in, supportive. Teddy, for what it's worth, a lot of us here appreciate your talent and your message. Asterisk, thank you, Michael. I appreciate that, Teddy said, nodding before turning back to George. But your boy here has other plans. Asterisk, my boy. George sputtered. The disrespect is unbelievable. Asterisk, you want to talk about disrespect? Teddy rose to his feet, his microphone still clipped on. You invited me under the pretense of a promotional interview. Instead, you've spent the entire time trying to tear me down. And for what? Because I don't look like what you think a star should look like. Because I didn't come from money or connections. Because I represent something real that makes you uncomfortable. Asterisk, the cameras were still rolling. The producers backstage were panicking, unsure whether to cut away or lean into the chaos. It was live television gold and a nightmare. Asterisk, George stood as well, voice sharp. You're done here? This interview is over. Asterisk, I agree, Teddy. Shot back, it is over. Because I'm not going to sit here and let you treat me like I'm beneath you. Security, George called out, actually summoning them. Gasps rippled through the audience. Robin stood quickly. George, come on, that's not necessary. Asterisk, he's being hostile. George insisted, pointing at Teddy. Asterisk, he's defending himself, Michael countered, standing too. Against your attacks. Asterisk attacks. George's voice rose. I asked legitimate questions. Asterisk, you asked insulting questions designed to make him look small. Robin said firmly, her composure cracking. We all heard it. George, the whole country heard it. Asterisk, Teddy unclipped his microphone. I'll see myself out. No need. Security to escort a guy you clearly think isn't good enough to be here anyway. Asterisk, that's right. Leave, George said bitterly. Run back to your little internet fans who don't know the difference between real talent and viral moments. Asterisk, Teddy stopped and turned back slowly. You know what the saddest part of all this is, George? You used to be someone I looked up to. I watched you interview people with intelligence and grace. But somewhere along the way, you forgot that the people you interview are human beings with feelings and dignity. You became the kind of person who uses their power to make others feel small, and that's not strength, that's weakness. Asterisk, the studio fell silent. Robin's eyes glistened. Michael shook his head. The audience hung on to every word. George opened his mouth, but no words came. For once, the polished newsman had no response. Asterisk, I hope you find your way back to who you used to be. Teddy said softly, the anger gone, replaced by pity. Because this version of you, it's not someone to be proud of. Asterisk, with that, Teddy walked off the set. The cameras followed him through the studio, past crew members who patted him on the back, past audience members offering supportive nods. He didn't storm off or slam anything. He walked away with his head held high, dignity intact. Asterisk, back at the anchor desk, chaos erupted. George argued with producers through his earpiece. Robin whispered urgently to Michael. The show cut to an unscheduled commercial break. When they returned, George was composed again, but something in his eyes had changed. Asterisk, Robin took the lead. "We're going to take a different direction this morning," she said smoothly. "And we want to thank Teddy Swims for stopping by." Asterisk, indeed. George added stiffly, clearly coached during the break. Asterisk, but the damage was done. In a few minutes of live television, everything had shifted. A talented artist had been disrespected, stood up for himself, and been punished for it, and America had watched it unfold. Asterisk, the remaining segments felt hollow. George's interviews were noticeably timid. Robin and Michael exchanged heavy looks. The studio energy never recovered. What began as a routine interview became something bigger. Moment that exposed the disconnect between traditional media gatekeepers and modern artists who built success outside the system. To some, success is only valid if it follows a predefined path, looks a certain way, comes from the right background. Asterisk Teddy Swims walked onto that set as a guest promoting his music. He left as a symbol of authenticity in an industry that often rewards the opposite, someone who refused to be diminished, even when facing down a powerful figure on live national television. Asterisk and George Stephanopoulos, the seasoned journalist, who once interviewed presidents and world leaders, revealed something too. That even with decades of experience, power can cloud compassion, and prestige can become a shield for arrogance. The contrast could not have been clearer between a tattooed singer from Georgia who worked for everything he had, and a media veteran who forgot the simple principle of treating people with respect. Asterisk. Teddy had represented one side of the cultural shift without ever intending to. He was the guy who worked regular jobs, built his career one YouTube video at a time, and spoke from the heart without pretending to be anything he wasn't. On the opposite side stood a network news anchor in an expensive suit, wielding his platform like a weapon and struggling to see value in anyone who didn't fit his rigid idea of what worthiness looked like. The studio audience that morning saw the contrast. The crew working behind the scenes saw it. Robin Roberts and Michael Strahan definitely saw it. And most importantly, millions of viewers at home saw it too. They watched, in real time, who carried themselves with grace under pressure and who revealed their true colors the moment they were challenged. Asterisk as Teddy pushed through the studio doors and stepped into the cool New York morning. He took a breath that felt like freedom. The city noise washed over him, a stark contrast to the tense, artificial silence of the television set he had just left behind. His phone buzzed, non-stop messages from viewers, fellow artists, industry friends, fans from around the world. All of them saying the same thing. You handled that perfectly. You stood your ground. You didn't let him break you. Asterisk inside the studio. George sat stiffly at the anchor desk during another commercial break, staring down at his notes. Robin walked over carefully. "That got out of hand," she said gently. "He was disrespectful." George muttered without meeting her eyes. Robin shook her head. "George, you went after him from the first question." We all heard it. He was defending himself. George scoffed that he was just doing his job, but even he didn't sound convinced. Michael joined them and said bluntly, "Your job is to interview people, not tear them down. He came here excited to share his music, and you treated him like he didn't belong." George finally looked up. For a brief second, regret flickered across his face, but he pushed it down quickly, claiming they were both overreacting and insisting the whole thing would blow over. Robin and Michael exchanged a knowing glance. It wouldn't. This was the kind of moment that stuck. Asterisk the rest of the show limped along, every segment feeling hollow. Producers scrambled in the control room as phones lit up and social media exploded. The clip was already everywhere, being reposted, analyzed, praised, and memed across the internet. And the verdict was clear. Teddy Swims had won the moment before he even left the building. George's attempt to ask hard questions had backfired spectacularly. Instead of looking tough or authoritative, he came across as out of touch and elitist. Teddy, on the other hand, looked grounded, principled, and honest. Their clash represented something much bigger than a bad interview. It reflected a cultural conversation about who gets to define success. Whether the old gatekeepers still matter, and whether authenticity carries more weight than polish. Teddy hadn't gone on the show to make a statement. He went to talk about his music and his journey, but when someone attacked his character, his appearance, and his background, he stood firm. Not angrily, but truthfully. George, perhaps without realizing it, represented the opposite, the establishment mindset. The belief that success only counts if it follows a certain path, looks a certain way, or comes from a certain pedigree. Tattoos, casual clothes, working-class roots, things Teddy embraced were things George treated like flaws. And in that clash, millions of people knew immediately which side they related to. By the time the show ended. The energy in the studio was thick with discomfort. Crew members avoided George's gaze. Producers whispered urgently. Robin and Michael regrouped with staff to plan next steps, their expressions serious. This wasn't a moment anyone would forget. George collected his notes and left quietly. Without the usual small talk or goodbyes, outside, Teddy stood on the sidewalk with his team gathering around him. His manager exhaled. "That was intense. You okay?" Teddy nodded, and surprisingly, he smiled. It wasn't smug or spiteful, just real. "Yeah," he said softly. "I just couldn't let him talk to me like that. I couldn't pretend it." "Was okay?" His publicist scrolled through her buzzing phone. "Everyone's on your side. The response is incredible." Teddy shrugged. "I wasn't trying to win anything. I just wanted respect. Basic human respect." And that, ultimately, was the heart of the entire confrontation. Not virality, not publicity, not strategy. Just one person asking to be treated like a human. And refusing to shrink when someone tried to make him feel small.